Is God open to changing? This may sound like, no, absolutely not. What kind of ridiculous question is that? But we talked about God being open to change in our worship service last Sunday. If you haven't caught that, you can always go back and catch my spectacular sermon from that worship service. That is the one for that March 16th. It's posted there on our YouTube channel. But we have all heard the idea that God is unchanging, immutable. God is perfect in every possible way. I mean, perfect doesn't even make sense because it suggests God is made, and God's not made of anything. And we all kind of depend on this as how God is, but there are biblical stories in which God changes, right? I think of when God picks Saul to be king of Israel, and then a few chapters later, God wishes God had not picked Saul to be king of Israel. And God repents from having picked Saul. I mean, God repents? What the hell? Yeah, that's the biblical God. Our idea that God is unchanging really is, it's our idea. We needed this sort of guarantor of what we were seeing. What you look at in the world, what you observe, what you measure, there needs to be some sort of principle, some Archimedean point beyond that guarantees everything's going to function, and that became God. And for a lot of our way of thinking in the West especially, God was a hypothesis that we needed to make our science work. And this is, of course, even before the scientific revolution. As the scientific revolution began, we began realizing that we didn't need the God hypothesis for certain things in order to work. We could explain them without there being a magical man in the sky who moved things around. Ultimately, we got to the point where there wasn't a whole lot left that needed God to explain it. And so, we don't need God for that hypothesis. Well, that wasn't God, right? That was just our holes in our knowledge, and we still have them, by the way. We just decided we don't need God to fill them. But that's not the God of the Bible, right? The God of the Bible is ready to destroy God's own people because of their sins, and Moses says, God, this would be terrible PR if you do that. Who's going to worship you if you kill your own people? And God says to Moses, that's a really good point. I repent from what I plan to do. God's mind changes in the Bible, and God is open to change. And we see God's openness to change in the reading that was our first reading on Sunday from Genesis 15. Abram has said, God, when do I get the nation that you were going to give me? And God promises you're going to get this nation. And then we have this eerie ritual that takes place where God has Moses sever these animals, and God passes between the halves of them. And this is the way you would make a covenant in those days, saying the parties that passed between the animals would say, in effect, may I be split in two if I fail to live up to the covenant. And normally either both parties would pass through, or the stronger party would stand there watching while the weaker one passed through and said, I promise I'll be good. Here, Abram is definitely the weaker of the two parties, but Abram just watches as God passes through. God says, I am open to the concept of being ripped in half if I do not deliver on my promise to you. That is a God who is open to change. Now, it's, the effect of the statement is, I'm good for it. But it speaks of a God who understands that I have to work with human beings, and human beings are what they are. God is open to us and to working with us. And that's how we're able to be open to working with God and to other people. So, God's, a lot of things, but our ideas about unchanging, immutable, which it turned out we didn't need for science, they might not be God. One thing God promises to do is to be faithful. That faithfulness won't go away. But God's working with you and me. And we're difficult. But thank God, God's open to working with us. That's our Lenten check-in for today and for this second full week in Lent. I hope you're having a good Lent so far, and we'll see you next week. Bye.